And I've said before, he speaks about his company, his strategy, the way he designs product. With regard to product, there's not a wasted element. And with regard to his expression of where he wants to take the company and his vision, there's not a wasted word. He's one of the most insightful speakers on business that I've ever heard. And I learned enormously from him through the years, just watching him and listening to what he had to say about the way he ran that company.
I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs.
Why Steve Jobs?
Well, I think that he has amazing vision around what consumers will use and like. When you look at the predictions and the trends that he saw in the PC industry, everything down to the mouse. Well, yes, there might have been other people who invented those things and got them started, but he could recognize a trend that would catch on with consumers. The same way he has with the iPod and the iPhone. So I think he has a great eye for what consumers want. And I also think he's amazing at talking about really complicated technology in a way that people fundamentally understand.
Because we assume he is 99% marketing and hardly technical.
Oh, well, I've met with Steve Jobs, and if you talk to him about technology, right, like the resolution on a video player, or what different types of encoding should be used in this player or that player, he has very deep knowledge of all of those. So in my view, he's very much a technology. He's also a great marketer, but it really is the blend of both.
And has a fair good sense of design, too.
Exactly.
And when people talk to you about comparing Sergey and Larry and Steve Jobs, what do they say?
Well, actually, one of the smart things that former Vice President Gore, who is on the board of Apple and is very close to Steve Jobs and is a close advisor to Google over the years, said to me, he said, these are brilliant guys. He said the difference between the Google guys and Steve Jobs is that Steve had a great setback in his life. And when he lost control of Apple in 97. And from that, or actually early in 97, 85, he came back in 97. And he said that experience of loss, that punch in the nose, gave him an experience and a sense of humility and it prepared him better for the battles ahead.
When you look at inventors, from the Wright brothers to Steve Jobs, they really had this passion for what they were doing. Yeah, they wanted to make money probably, but it was really about the passion, and that really is part of what makes us great.
You reminded me, because it's in the book, about remembering what Steve Jobs said. He said it in a famous speech he made, a commencement speech at the Stanford Business School.
Yeah.
What he said about the most freeing time for him was when he lost his company.
He was sacked from
Apple. And he had to sort of start all over.
Yep.
And he went and bought and created Pixar, and he then got back at Apple. But what did he say about that period for him?
He said that he suddenly felt a great lightness of being freed of this success. And that after having the success, that he was suddenly freed to reinvent himself, to do what he wanted to do, to be creative. And, I really do think that's an applicable lesson to us as individuals, as we've been knocked off our horses this last year, and as a country.
Friends who knew Steve Jobs and journalists who wrote about him, there will be much written about Steve Jobs, including the upcoming biography by Walter Isaacson. And this magazine just out, Bloomberg Business Week, in which they quote Steve Jobs talking about living and dying, saying, "Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You're already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart." That comes from the Stanford University commencement speech, and we repeat some of that now.
No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
Remembering and appreciating Steve Jobs, who died this week at age 56. Thank you for joining us. Funding for Charlie Rose has been provided by the Coca-Cola Company, supporting this program since 2002. And American Express. Additional funding provided by these funders.
Could that be a minute?
And by Bloomberg, a provider of multimedia news and information services worldwide.